Welcome. My name is Sarah Pierpont. I'm the Executive Director of the New Mexico Recycling Coalition. And with me is Juliana Ciano, our Deputy Director.
Hey everybody, and we're here at Reunity Resources, Compost Yard, Soil Yard, and Regenerative Farm in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Before we get started with our hands-on demonstration to build a backyard compost system, we'd like to go over a few general concepts first. This information will help you be better equipped to build an effective and productive compost system in your very own backyard. Compost has many benefits as a soil amendment. These include retaining moisture, adding nutrients, creating a healthy soil food web, increasing plants' resiliency to survive drought and fight off disease, and increasing their vitality and photosynthesis rate, which actually sequesters carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and puts it into the soil. According to the EPA, nearly 30% of what Americans throw away is food scraps and yard trimmings. When this goes into a landfill and decomposes in an anaerobic environment, it creates methane, a dangerous greenhouse gas at least 20 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Another benefit of homemade backyard compost is that it contains locally indigenous microorganisms which benefit our high desert soils. Cold composting is also known as easy or dump and run composting and does not sustain a large amount of heat. This home composting method mimics nature's method, sort of like a forest floor. With proper management, it can be static or passive, so it may not need to be turned. The temperature of the compost varies with the ambient air temperature, and the compost process correlates with the growing season. In warmer months, compost is produced more quickly than during colder times of the year. In New Mexico, this system takes anywhere from 4 to 8 months to create a finished product, and that timeline depends on the volume and frequency of material added to the pile, the temperature, the moisture content, and airflow. Today we'll be demonstrating two different cold composting systems, a straw bale system that consists of 6 to 8 straw bales and an enclosed black compost bin. With New Mexico's sunny, warm desert environment, it's important to reduce evaporation and hold in moisture in our compost piles. To do this with the straw bale system, we simply put a tarp over the top of the pile or a thick layer of carbon-rich material. For the black compost bin, first we select a bin that does not have too many air holes on the sides. We need to keep the lid closed and place the bin in the shade during summer months. This is especially important if worms are added to the system, as they can die if it gets too hot and dry. It is also best for your black compost bin to have an open bottom and be placed directly on the soil for proper drainage and temperature regulation. To choose which system is right for you, consider space. The black compost bin requires about 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet tall, and the straw bale system requires a footprint of about 8 feet by 8 feet. The recipe for compost is carbon, also known as brown material, plus nitrogen, also known as green material, plus oxygen, plus water, and of course, plus time as well. Carbon or brown material tends to be dry, branchy, woody, slower to rot, high in carbon, and low in nitrogen. Examples include dry grass, leaves, wood chips, or cardboard pieces. The carbon provides microbial nutrition, and on its own, the carbon-rich material does not decompose very quickly. Nitrogen or green material tends to be moist, sappy, soft, faster to rot, and low in carbon and high in nitrogen. Examples include food scraps, green yard clippings, coffee grounds, hair, feathers, moldy food, etc. The nitrogen-rich material provides microbial nutrition and protein for reproduction and cell wall formation. In this easy cold composting backyard system, airflow occurs naturally by adding bulky carbon-rich layers such as small twigs, straw, or pine cones that reduce the compaction of the organic material. Aeration can also be achieved by turning the compost pile occasionally. This is your choice. If enough bulking material is applied, you do not need to turn the compost pile. However, turning the pile can speed up the overall decomposition process. You may also need to turn your pile if you notice that it is beginning to smell or if the layers are compacted. By adding a bulking agent, you achieve a chimney effect or convection aeration of your compost pile. Bulk as you build to maintain airflow and reduce odors. Start with 6 to 12 inches of bulking material put directly onto the soil at the bottom of your straw bale or black compost bin system. Then add a 6 to 8 inch layer of your organic material. That's your carbon and nitrogen. With this method, we recommend starting with 1 part carbon to 1 part nitrogen by volume in order to get your 6 to 8 inch layer of organic materials. This will happen slowly over time as you generate kitchen scraps and yard waste. After you have built up your organic layer, add another 4-inch layer of bulking material and repeat that as you build your pile. 6 to 8 inches of organic carbon and nitrogen mixed, followed by 4 inches of bulking material. Bulking material is usually woody material that is slow to decompose, so you may need to screen it out when harvesting your compost. Common bulking items include pine cones, corn cobs, corn stalks, small twigs, straw, etc. They all work to decrease compaction of the wet organics and help airflow throughout the pile to maintain an oxygen-rich environment. Composting in the desert requires the addition of water and efforts to reduce evaporation. Your compost pile should have approximately 50% moisture. This is similar to freshly brewed coffee grounds or a wrung-out sponge, moist but not dripping. To reach this 50% moisture, add water to dry materials when you add them into your compost pile. These are usually your carbon-rich brown materials. You can add water by soaking items in a wheelbarrow full of water before adding them to your pile, using a hose or a watering can, or simply washing out your kitchen compost bin with water each time you empty it into your pile. Moisture is important for numerous reasons. Microorganisms can only function in a thin film of moisture on organic materials. Within that moisture film, the microorganisms secrete enzymes which transform organic material to humus. In our compost demonstration, we'll be introducing red wiggler worms into our compost piles. They aid with decomposition and serve as a macroorganism. They also need a moist environment. Moisture will speed up the decomposition process. A simple way to retain water is to increase the surface area of your feedstock by chopping it into smaller pieces. This is mainly true for your carbon-rich feedstock. The larger items may be part of your bulking layers to ensure proper airflow, but it's best to use more fine feedstock for that 6 to 8 inch layer of carbon and nitrogen. This will improve water absorption, which fosters microbial activity and speeds up the decomposition process. And we already mentioned that to retain water and reduce evaporation, be sure to close the lid of your plastic compost bin or cover the top of your straw bale with a thick carbon layer or tarp. In the simple dump and run or cold backyard composting system, it is best to avoid adding certain items to reduce pests and odors and to ensure proper decomposition of materials. Avoid adding meat, animal waste, dairy products, fat or grease, ashes or coals, weeds and diseased plants or any plants that have been treated with pesticides, and compostable plastics. While compostable plastics may break down in commercial operations that reach a really high temperature, they don't work so well in home composting systems.
Now that you know the basic formula, let's get started building the pile. We're going to start with 6 to 7 standard straw bales. Remember, straw is different than hay, so make sure you're asking for straw. We have 6 to create the rectangle, right? They're on their high side, 2 on the long ends, 1 making the short side of the rectangle. This one will just come in here. Shoot. So I've got my little bin. Again, it's about 8 feet by 8 feet. Across the base of it, I'm going to use either straw from one of these bales, or if I've purchased an extra, I'm going to just get myself some bedding, okay? Since I'm adding worms in here, I want them to have a lot of pockets to crawl around and a nice little aerated nest to get things started. So I'm just adding straw, and we talked about moisture, really important. So I'm adding the straw, and then I'm getting it nice and wet, having a really welcoming environment for those wormies. Once I have this base layer down, now I'm ready to add the food waste that I've been saving in the kitchen. The basic ratio we're working with is 1 to 1. So here I've got part of a 5-gallon bucket of my greens, my food waste. I've got some cabbage leaves, I've got some kale, some eggshells, pumpkins rotten. I'm going to just add that right onto the nest there. And then browns, right? It's all about the layering. And here it's autumn. Lots of dried leaves. Shaking that on top. And here are my little worm friends. Worms are a little bit shy, so you might not always see them on the surface, right? They live in the ground. They like it where it's dark. The red wiggler worms that we're adding actually love food waste. Ground worms that might show up after a rainstorm are more interested in the brown waste, like dead leaves, dried sticks, etc., etc. So these red wiggler worms, let's see if I can find some for you here. Oh yeah, there they are. Hey, little guy. These are gonna go in, and I'm not gonna put them right on top all exposed. I'm gonna kind of nestle them in. They love finding their way inside of things, right? Inside of this pumpkin, inside of the eggshells. Ooh, look at them. So happy. And then I'm gonna make sure that they're really tucked in. Because again, they're worms, they like to be in the ground. And once I have my 1-to-1 ratio of greens, browns with the worms tucked inside, again, I could rinse out my bucket. I have my food waste bucket. Give it a little rinse. Just saves me time washing it in the kitchen later. Give it a rinse and add that on top as well.
In practice, home composters will most likely build their compost pile slowly over time. As you build your pile, each layer of organic material should be about 6 to 8 inches thick before adding another bulking layer to help aerate the pile.
Voila! There is our straw bale backyard composting with worms.
The process is really similar when you're using the black bin composting system as well. It's a matter of layering your carbons, your browns, with your nitrogens, your greens, just like Juliana showed us in the straw bale system. So first we're going to open our bin, add in some of our carbons, some of our browns, and of course after we do that we want to water the system, creating that nice wet environment for our worms and also for all of our naturally occurring microbes to help create our compost. So next we have our food scraps, a lot of great items from the kitchen, tops of carrots, pizza crusts, just goes right in the bin alongside the browns, and a little bit more of carbon-rich material, leaves, which is added to the bin. And so now I have those layers that our friends, the red wriggler worms, are going to love. And I'm going to put them in, tucked in, just like Juliana did in the straw bales, tucked in between the carbon layers where they can get that food and really help break it down. So these little guys are going to go gently in here. And I'm going to rinse out my system, my food container again. This helps keep your kitchen a lot cleaner. And that water is the moisture you're going to need for your compost pile. If your compost is a little bit smelly or it's attracting mice or other pests, it's a really simple fix. Simply give it a mix, turn it around a little bit, let that air reach the little more depth of the compost pile, and then add a little bit more of the brown waste. It might be too wet and that could be causing the odors. So the brown waste is your carbon, your straw, and it wants to resemble a wrung out sponge. So 50% moisture content. To harvest the compost from your black composting bin, when it's ready, you simply open the bottom door and scoop out the finished product. And you get this great black, nutrient-rich material that you can apply to your garden. With the straw bale system, it's a little bit different.
When you're ready to harvest compost from your straw bale pile, we recommend feeding your food waste to just one corner of this pile for a week or two before you're going to be pulling out finished compost for your garden. This will draw the worms inside to that corner naturally, making it easier to get your finished compost from the other side of the bin without disturbing them. So I've added some new food waste for a couple of weeks. This has been my corner. Cover that in, and then I'm gonna go over to the other side here to get my finished compost. I'm gonna take off my high carbon layer, and wow, oh, you see this has been here for many months now, and I have just tons of rich finished compost. When it's done, it should be cool, it should be moist, and it should smell sweet. Oh yeah, the garden is gonna love this stuff.
Remember, making backyard compost is fun and easy, it's good for the environment, and anyone can do it.